So a few of our long-time viewers have unfortunately had some pretty serious issues with their motorcycles. We've had an engine blow up and we've had a gearbox malfunction, which absolutely sucks, but that is the unfortunate truth with motorcycles. They all have a use by date, and that's especially true with small displacement bikes such as the 125cc class. I mean, they are made to be cheap. They're not made out of the best materials in the world, and the only way you can get any power out of them is to rev the absolute shit out of them. So it is to be expected. I mean, 125cc bikes, if they last more than 15,000 miles, it's a miracle. But the way how these motorcycles are treated, you don't really expect them to live all that long. However, if you do want the maximum amount of life out of your motorcycle, well, in today's video, we're going to give you a few checks for all of you to do every 2, 3, 4 weeks, something like that, which will hopefully expand the lifespan of your motorcycle and hopefully will prevent some of these things from happening, some of these catastrophic failures from happening. So yeah, let's jump right into the video today with fluids. So let's start off with perhaps the most obvious fluid, oil. This is the lifeblood of your motorcycle, and checking it is really easy. There's a couple of ways to know if your motorcycle has enough oil. The first one is to check the level. So just stand the bike up on its two wheels and make sure that the level is in between the two markings on the engine case. However, there is another way to make sure that your motorcycle has oil, and that's to check the floor. If there is any fluid, in fact, any fluid that you see that's on the floor, investigate where that's come from, because more than likely it's going to be a few things. It's going to be oil, coolant, or brake fluid. It's going to be one of those things, and if you can find out what that issue is before you even started the motorcycle, then you've probably saved it. Speaking of fluids, the next most important one perhaps is brake fluid. If you want to make sure you can go, you want to make sure you can stop just as well. It's really easy checking brake fluid. You've got two reservoirs, one on the handlebar and one down by the rear wheel. Check the level, make sure it's topped up, and check the color. If it's kind of a dark brown, then it is gone and you need to replace it. The biggest issue with brake fluid is that it's hygroscopic, so it will actually absorb water and moisture from the atmosphere, and that's not what you want. In brake lines, if you've got gaps in where the fluid is supposed to be pushing on the pistons, then you might end up in a situation where you just pull the brake lever and nothing happens. The brake lever just sinks all the way to the handlebar and you won't stop. So yeah, brake fluid is a pretty important one, especially on the front brake. The last, but certainly not least most important fluid is coolant. You want to make sure that your bike doesn't overheat. When things start overheating, that's when metal starts welding itself together. Now, coolant a lot of the time is just water with antifreeze. And there's usually a reservoir kept just behind a piece of fairing. Check your owner's manual to make sure that you know exactly where it is, but it should just be a case of taking off one panel, maybe two, to check the level. If the level's okay, then you're pretty much good to go. However, it should be changed maybe every couple of years or so, something like that, just to make sure it's nice and fresh. All right, so that is all the fluids, but one really important thing that I want you guys to check maybe once a year is the brake pads. Now, this is something that I learned very recently, in fact, is that on cars, on brake pads for cars, you have like a little metal piece right at the very end that starts grinding against the disc, and that means that it's worn. And that if you hear that in your car, then you know that the brake pads need to be changed. But that doesn't actually exist on motorcycle brake pads. So that's why it's especially important to check your brake pads at least once a year. Yeah, that's a biggie. So once you can make sure that your motorcycle stops properly, the last thing you want to check is what meets you with the road, i.e. your tyres. Now, tyres are pretty hardy things. You don't have to worry about them too much. You will have some people that will say, check your tyres every single time you ride. Just make sure they're not flat. And of course, make sure that they've got a little bit of tread, make sure they've got some pressure in them. Now, in the UK, tread depth on motorcycle tyres, you only have to see the tread itself to make sure that it's all right. So as long as you can see a little bit of tread, you should be fine. Now, in terms of how much pressure to put in the tyres, just go with spec. You get these arguments on forums and what have you about how much you should and shouldn't pump up your tyres. And it's like, well, if you just do what the spec sheet says or what your owner's manual says, then you should be all right. I personally like to overinflate my tyres just a little bit, maybe 1 to 2 psi. That's just a personal preference thing. But yeah, as long as they're in spec, you should be absolutely fine. But what I will say is when your tyres are under pressure or under pressurized, you will feel a massive difference in the performance of the tyres. So if you make sure that they are at spec pressure, then, well, 1, the motorcycle is going to feel a lot better, but 2, the performance of the tyre is going to be max, and that's really what you want. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are all the things that I would like you to check out on your motorcycle every once in a while. Now, the interval at which you do these checks is entirely up to you. I'm quite a lazy guy, so these kinds of checks I do once per month, roughly. But these are newer motorcycles. If you own something that's a little bit older, then you're more than likely need to give it a little bit more TLC and do these checks maybe a little bit more regularly. Now, unfortunately, with anything mechanical, there's always that chance that something can just go catastrophically wrong and you'll never know what it was. There's nothing you could have done about it. But hopefully, if you keep your motorcycle serviced regularly, if you keep it clean and you do these checks regularly, then hopefully it will at least prevent some of these catastrophic issues from happening, or at least lengthen the lifespan of your motorcycle. But yeah, thank you ever so much for watching today's video. Leave a like if it has helped you out. And of course, if there's anything that I have missed, definitely drop it down in the comments below, as I'm sure I've missed something. But yeah, if there's something that you like to check regularly on your motorcycle, then I'm sure that someone else would also like to know about it. So yeah, definitely drop all that lovely, juicy info in the comments. But yeah, thank you ever so much again for watching. Leave a like, hit subscribe, and we will catch you all in the next one.